Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the show Mindful Matters on Radio Al Ansar, 90.4 FM in Durban and 105.6 FM in Pietermaritzburg. A show that promises to provide an hour of inspiration, information and motivation. With me, your host Nazia Iram Osman. Please feel free to participate in the show. The WhatsApp number is 060 904 1056. The topic for today is burnout. So burnout, simply put, is a syndrome resulting from ongoing workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. It was not previously recognized by the medical fraternity, but this year, the World Health Organization, in its revision of the International Classification of Disease, that is the ICD-10-11, has formally recognized it as an occupational phenomenon. Symptoms of burnout include feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance from one's job or feelings of negativity or cynicism relating to one's job, and reduced professional competency. So research on burnout dates back to 1974. And while burnout has been widely discussed as a problem in society, it hasn't really been taken seriously or viewed as a legitimate medical condition. Even at present, if you heard the definition, it's still looked at as a workplace phenomenon, and its repercussions are not considered. To tell us more about this is clinical psychologist Dr. Shaista Hamid. Welcome, Dr. Hamid.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Nazia, for having me here today.
Dr. Hamid was our first guest on Mindful Matters. That was 3 months ago, so I'm so thrilled to have her back.
I'm so glad you called me back.
And we're hoping to call her, every month if we can. So can I call you Shaista? Is that okay?
Yes. I think we've gotten to that point now.
Okay. So Shaista and I have worked before quite closely. So we're quite, I would say, dear friends. So now and then we might, go into laughter or say some, I'm hoping, decent jokes. So we'll stick to that.
We'll keep it R-rated.
Yeah, for sure. So my first question is, serious now. There's been a lot of, progress in recognizing burnout as a condition, right? But it's still being limited to the occupational setup. So that the new definition still sees it as only within the occupational or, where you work. What does this exactly imply? And do you agree that burnout only happens in the work context and its effect stays, within the workspace?
I think what it implies is that society then, and when I say society, I'm looking at corporates like medical and insurance companies and things like that, like Discovery, GEMS, all these companies now, will only limit it to a workplace occurrence. And therefore, even the individual then will start limiting it to a workplace occurrence. And then we'll have programs like your employee assistance programs, perhaps based at the workplace, intervening and looking at it just specifically within that one context. But anything which impacts on your state of mind and your mental well-being is bound to spill over. And I don't think we can have such a limited, such a one contextualized framework for understanding burnout, because this is something that's going to most definitely impact on other aspects of your life, your home life, your relationships, your friendships, just the things you would normally do, such as your exercising, your hobbies, your matters of interest to you. And I don't even think we should just even look at it as let's not just even be so specific as to look at the individual. Let's look at our country. Right. This year, 2019, I think, has been a difficult year for the country and for a lot of people I've come into contact with. I'm not sure about you, but I hear a lot of negative experiences and a lot of negative energy going around this year. And then I saw this trend start to come up. And like, for example, if you're on social media, there's that I'm staying group.
Right.
And suddenly it was, let's stop talking about all the negatives and let's start focusing on the positives. And it's interesting how some people reacted to the group. Some were like, yes, I'm so happy to be participating in something that's giving me hope and aspirations again and inspiring me about my country. And then other people were like, no, you're just being ignorant and you're being in denial. But it's not being in denial. It's literally looking at both phases of the pros and cons of the country. And then in the last week, if we look in particular at the spirit and the tone of the energy of the country has taken, especially behind our Springbok team.
After the rugby,
Yeah,
winning,
that slogan of together we stand stronger or stronger together, that is so fantastic. And if you look at that like has touched every South African, I think. And it took away that pessimism. Even if it was momentarily, one hopes it's not momentarily, but it took away the pessimism. And suddenly you had a country reunited, optimistic and full of hope again. And yesterday when we won, you felt that in every corner of South Africa, urban,
the
rural,
patriotism
wherever.
that has been latent for a while now.
Yes, and I think the burnout that was impacting on the country lifted for a minute. It's almost like we got injected with a new energy.
Yeah.
Like, if we could conquer that with the odds so against us, together we can do anything else. Right. So I don't think burnout is just limited to a person. It can be limited to community and I think to our country. And that's why you need these injections of other kinds of energy, other kinds of optimism to change the perspective and the way we deal. But it's too limited to think that it's just affecting you at work. Right. Could be your housewife who's experiencing burnout because if you look at the, in our day, I'm saying in our days, like we're so old, but back when I was young.
Even back sounds old, I'm just saying.
Back, okay. There was a time when I was in primary school, like even lunch making, which our moms would do, was very simple. Just made a sandwich, you gave it to the kid, and the kid ate it. Today, it's like, oh no, moms must be like, is it gluten-free? Is it low GI? The child doesn't eat bread, perhaps. We must have a mixture. It must be cut in certain shapes. Even something as simplistic as making lunch has become so
because I think it's a lot of pressure to conform. Everything's very competitive. We have many choices.
Exactly. And then when we have social media there, we have to live up to this expectation of good enough. And, you got to be on that level. We all, that's that phrase, level up. We've all got to level up now, which puts added pressure on us. As adults, it puts pressure on our teenagers, on the school-going kids, everybody.
So trying to excel. I think no one's happy to just be good enough because as much as we say, it's good enough, but in this day and age, nothing is good enough.
And then you're constantly comparing to the other. So how would anything be good enough? So obviously then it leads off to that avenue where you'll suddenly feel, but is my life good enough? Have I done enough?
Is my work good enough? Is anything good enough?
Should I be doing more, perhaps? Before maybe I'm happy just going for a holiday to Drakensberg. Now I see, other people are going overseas. Now I'm not happy with that holiday in Drakensberg that brought me so much joy before. So that constant comparison can also lead to burnout. Definitely. And I think we need to be a bit vigilant about the impact and effects of social media on our lives and our lifestyles, because then it can lead you to being unsatisfied. Is that the word?
With what you have, yeah.
With what you have. I'm not going to say not grateful, but unsatisfied, because it doesn't seem as good as what the others
But I mean,
have.
it makes sense to us because, and I have to comment on this, every single show, no matter what the topic, social media comes up because it's just so rife in our lives, and the impact and the influence of it is just, we can't deny it. It comes into every sphere, whether it's bullying, whether it's marital counseling, whatever it is. And I think it's that constant comparison. And, I think it's the social comparison theory that psychology makes sense of this, that, we find, or just say you have a house. I think that's the picture they explained it with. You have a house and you find, and then you put a smaller house next to it, you feel even better. But if you put a bigger house next to it, then all of a sudden your house is not good enough anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And I think instead of us looking at our own journey and where have we come from and what was that house before and what is it now, which would give us fulfillment and satisfaction, we look at other people's houses.
Yeah.
So our perspective is wrong
has
now.
Changed.
It's changed.
And then timelines. And that's another thing that I see. I'm sure you'd also see it in practice, that people are constantly comparing themselves. I'm not a mother yet, or I'm not married yet, or I haven't gotten my degree yet, or that constant, the timelines not enough anymore as well.
And that's also leading to, when I think later on you're going to bring up the issue of millennial burnout.
Yeah.
The timelines are changing. Because before at 18 or 17 was it, you were meant to be married, right?
Yeah.
And now it's changing where you're going to pursue a career first and then get married. But then there's that clash between tradition and
the changes,
new age.
Yeah. Because I don't know if you agree with this. I think it was the white community, always marriage was around late 20s, maybe around 30. But the Indian community just finished maybe high school,
Yeah.
By early 20s, people are married, and that's
Yeah.
the way it was.
Yeah.
And I'm not seeing that so much anymore.
Yes. I'm seeing a lot of young professionals who are saying, I don't need to get married right now. I want to achieve these goals. And then this pressure was coming from the older folks, but
From the family, yeah.
You know, you should be having a child by now, or this, that.
And I
But
think that's the thing,
also
you should be
changing.
having a child by now because, I think with all the pressures and the woman working, I don't know whether that's affecting the hormones or what. Lots of them are coming with infertility problems, or they're having children later. And I think across the board, no matter how driven the woman is, that, what is the biological clock ticking? I hear that. So I think that puts pressure on them.
But I wonder, is that pressure coming from society so much as yourself?
Maybe. I wonder. And then once again, social media comes in because you see people with pictures of kids, and
Yes.
it all seems all hunky-dory. Yeah, so that adds the other element.
Yeah, but also then you see, like with the working mums though. Now, so before, you would come home and you would have to just, or maybe you weren't working before, you just took care of the kids, and there was that pressure involved. But now it's almost like I've got to be competitive at work, and I've got to meet targets at work, and have a certain standard. And then we say it, but it's very hard to leave work at 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. and
actually switch off.
Switch off, right? So certain things stay with you. But then you go home, and I don't know if you experience this, I definitely do. Before my car door has even opened, there's my son. Bah, 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 bah. One way is going on.
When the mines greet me with the homework in their hand, I'm like, oh God, please, can I have just 10 minutes
you
just
don't even
to...
have like that minute to stop and breathe.
Yeah.
And then you have to meet their needs as well, which is, I've got to tell you so much about the day because you haven't been there. And sometimes it's simply like you've not just been there for an hour. It's not that big a deal. But then also in that, now you're suddenly starting to meet everybody's individual needs in that house. Now put aside your stressful day. Right. You've got to, like, each person, like in my house, each one has a different dietary need. So you have to meet all those needs. Plus you need to do with the homework. Plus you need, they say you have to take time out to do exercise and self-care and all this. How are we going to find time
to put all of that
and
together?
there's so much pressure on the working mom then to be perfect and to meet all the needs.
I actually read an article which said working mothers are very prone to burnout. And I can totally resonate with that, because what we fail to realize is, people will look from outside and say the more you have on your plate, the more blessed you are. And I agree, right? But every role you play, every task, something is expected of you. So you're a mother, and then there's so many goals you have to fill for that. You're a professional woman, there's so many goals you have to fill for that. So each one is pulling so much from you in terms of time, energy, attention.
And what's left of you?
And what is left of you.
But there's still that expectation you must take care of yourself though.
Yeah.
But where's the time?
To actually but this is what I advocate. I'll tell, when I speak of self-care, I can see everybody going, oh, one more thing to do. So I'll say, okay, look, you're going to shower, right? So run the shower and just be completely present and enjoy the water going off your back and be there. Or you're having a meal, have it with the intent of self-love. Enjoy every morsel. So self-care can come from being completely in the moment and doing whatever you're doing in your day, but mindfully and with the intention that I'm doing this to care for myself.
Definitely.
So instead of binging on the chocolate, reach for the carrot and say, this is good for my eyes. That's self-care as well. I mean, I know it's not the form. We all love, these long baths and the massages and time to meditate. But sometimes you don't have it.
But well, that's the picture now, isn't it? That's plays like self-care is that you must have a nice bubble bath with the 1 gazillion candles.
Who's going to light the candles? Who's
going to light it, and who's going to tell you to put the candles off?
Yeah.
But then the thing is, though, like you're saying, take it where you get it.
Yeah.
If it's in the shower, then
enjoy that moment.
Enjoy that moment. Don't wait for the next. Live in the present.
Of course.
Just soundproof your shower and lock the door
so the kids don't bang it down. I know it's like a weird thing to say, but they say only a mother will realize even bathroom time is such, what's the word am I looking for? A privilege.
It's a privilege.
It's a privilege. So you get that 5 minutes on your own in the bathroom. I think only a mom will understand that one. So let's get back to burnout. I think but the fact that we went down this route, it just shows that how much we are doing and how much all of these roles take out from us. We say, okay, look, we live in a country or we live in a place where everything is money, right? Even taking care of yourself, or you're coming up with symptoms of burnout, you need to go to the doctor. Or if you have medical aid, you think they'd cover it. But it's not really, it's not seen still as a medical condition. It's not like sitting in the DSM that we use, Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, you are.
Right. So what are the implications of this? Like, just say someone has a medical aid and they meet the criteria now for burnout. I mean, medical aid won't pay for this. What does this mean now?
Medical aid wouldn't. I think there's still some debate on starting to look at burnout and trying to introduce it perhaps. I think it should have been introduced in the DSM.
It hasn't been introduced yet. But more than that, I mean, one wonders, okay, just say even if the doctor treating you, okay, just say they know what burnout is and they diagnose you with burnout. Now what? I mean, they're only going to go symptomatically. They're only going to treat it like that, isn't it?
It's not like you can even get a sick leave
for burnout.
For diagnosis burnout, because your organization might not
even recognize it. And yet, if you think about how it's caused, I mean, I'm looking at I was doing some research on doctors and medical registrars, I think it was, or community service officers. 81% of them were burnt out. And this was in Cape Town, which is much better, equipped than we are in KwaZulu-Natal. So if our doctors, 81% of them are burnt out, you go to a hospital, I'm talking about in government hospitals, what's going to happen? So I think the implications need to be taken quite seriously.
Even if they're burnt out, they're not allowed to acknowledge it. Because it's seen as a sign of weakness, perhaps, in that environment. Like whether it was internship for us or for medical doctors, it's very driven. There's a lot of work involved, and you're meant to just cope somehow.
Right.
You're not supposed to show this is getting to me, because that's a sign of are you not cut out for this?
And imagine if the medical fraternity or the psychology fraternity is not taking this into cognizance, how will the other organizations actually take this seriously, or other kind of vocations take this seriously, when we're supposed to be the most aware of this?
Exactly. But I think you get some corporates that have, I think it started off with Google, because you saw they had the ideal corporate environment. So they actually had little like lounges or like nap rooms if you needed that. They had play areas like for the employees. So if you wanted to play table tennis or Xbox or whatever, but they had time out and different facilities, like somebody could come and give you a massage perhaps, or you could cycle within the campus. And I see some of this is radiating into South African corporates. So I think that's a good thing. But again, because it's not in the DSM, or it's not taught to medical practitioners or others, they're not going to recognize it. So when you go there, you're likely to be misdiagnosed, no?
Yeah.
And then
because I'm wondering how serious it's going to be taken. I mean, maybe say I'm depressed, maybe there'll be some cognizance taken of that.
And then the best that person might say to you is, you need a holiday. Which is
grand. Can I have a holiday, please?
We all need a holiday, but that's not the solution. The solution is to manage the burnout. And often I know, even at times when I've gone and I said, I'm feeling like a bit like battered, and I'm told, I think you need a vitamin B shot.
No, but I'm also guilty of that. I'll tell you, go to vitamin B12 works. It'll just boost you till you can carry on, get burnt out a bit more after that.
But I think if medical aids did, and the medical field did acknowledge it, we could probably manage it better. It would have acknowledgement. People around that person would understand. That person themselves would understand
what's going on,
and they'd understand what steps to take.
And I think here's a good part to bring in. The symptoms of burnout. I think we can highlight that, because one of them is cynicism, or where we become very turned off by work, give snide comments. But it's part of the fact that we're so exhausted. And people will take that as, she's just not passionate about her work, or she's not, but it isn't. So I think let's just pause there, and you can tell them what are the symptoms of burnout, so our listeners can hear out for it and know what to expect.
I think so. Like, one of the things is, like, let me just touch on what you said. So that disengagement, and that we use that like dark humor to help us cope.
We're not guilty of that at all. Not at all.
Not us. The other day is that feeling of every day is a bad day. So, I'm very guilty of this. I'm like, every Monday I'm complaining. Every Sunday.
She's burnt out on Mondays, guys.
I'm that person who hates Mondays and lives for Fridays, which is the worst kind of attitude you should be taking. You should be like looking forward to every day. But it's like every day is a bad day. And where you feel like you don't have the energy, or it's a waste of your time to care about home or work. Like neither is important. Like you just don't even have the energy. You're exhausted all of your time. The majority of your day is spent on tasks that you find dull or unstimulating. You feel nothing you're going to do is appreciated or is going to make a difference.
Okay.
I think, especially when you work in, like, as you spoke about doctors working in state facilities, with the resources being so minimal, you feel sometimes like you're fighting a losing battle.
Right.
And say if you're working in a call center or in a commission-based environment, you're having to constantly fight. Your stress levels are constantly on high alert, and sometimes you may feel like, how is this worth it? Because I know people like in call centers, I didn't realize this until I found out recently. Do you know their toilet breaks are monitored?
Oh my word.
So they're given 5 minutes to go to the toilet. If you're over, you can get a disciplinary warning.
Sure. So that's
Which is frightening.
that's highly stressful.
Exactly. So, but I think the physical signs are feeling tired and drained most of the time. Your immunity becomes lowered, so you get prone to being sick more often. Changes in appetite or sleep, frequent headaches or muscular pains. Emotionally, you might feel a sense of failure or self-doubt, or feel helpless or trapped.
So even the work that you're doing, you feel you're not doing it good enough. So it's
like you can't win, or you're not making an impact when maybe you actually are, but
the way you process
interpersonally you're not feeling it. And as you said, you become increasingly cynical and you have a negative outlook and a decreased sense of satisfaction and of accomplishment. So whatever you do, you don't even see that.
Yeah.
And behaviorally, you would start withdrawing from responsibilities. You may isolate yourself from your colleagues or co-workers, procrastinating, taking longer to do tasks, using food, drugs, or alcohol to cope, skipping work or coming in late and leaving early, that kind of thing. Oops.
Right. And with that oops, we're going to just pause there for a quick ad break. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. So Shaista and I were just looking at some of the questions that have come. And here's a question from, I'm assuming, a brother. It says, Assalamu alaikum sisters. My daughter always complains, don't have time. Always tired. What do you suggest?
I think that's a common feeling that we get across. I think even we feel like that. What's coming to my mind, if we compare when we were kids, there was always family time available. Weekends, shops weren't open, right?
Yeah.
So shops would close early on a Saturday, and then the rest of the weekend you had, and you could spend with family, and it was for that engagement. So you often visited relatives so often, right? Now we don't have it because generally both partners are working, and then the weekends is for running up all the chores and everything else that you haven't managed to maintain. So we can't maintain as much family time as possible. And also after a whole week of working, you're tired and you also need a time out.
So that work-life balance is very important.
But even if the person is a teenager, I mean, if you think, a lot of teenagers are going to school, but they have a lot of after-school activities that they have to catch up on, and generally on weekend there's tuition and the sporting activities. So I get the sentiment that there is no time and I'm feeling tired all the time. But I think to maintain that, one has to have boundaries and see that one is not overcommitted to too many causes. So pick
she has
one
to
or
prioritize
two.
and bring it
pick
down.
Pick one or two that's meaningful to her.
Right.
And make family also and family time a priority. Because unless you start prioritizing and creating that balance, it's not going to happen. And time will pass us by. And, we can't get back time once it has gone. So I would suggest she finds balance and prioritizes. And maybe even if she has like a list of, this weekend I do this, next weekend.
So almost time management skills, where consciously reflect on what you're doing, bring it down to a few important tasks, try not to overcommit, say no if you can't do it.
And like,
but
if you decide like once a week, like every Friday night is family supper night, for example. We all do family dinner together. So there's that feeling of we're all spending some time together.
And you're slotting it in, so it's going to be done. It's on the list.
Exactly, it's structured.
Yeah, it's structured. And here's another comment. It's from my dearest uncle Yusuf Patel. He says, we deserve some joy. We can rejoice and be proud. Joy can project miracles, and how our beloved country yearns for that. At last, something genuinely positive. Let's hope it signals the start of the end of racial and religious feudalism in our country and the beginning of better things economically. So I'm not sure if he's talking about the fact that the Bokkers won, and now the Springboks won, and now we all kind of, you commented on how there was a moment where we all came together, and
But
it
I
had such a
think,
good feel to it.
Also with the atmosphere within the country, be it economical, political, things were getting so strained that we almost started at some point, didn't we, to turn on each other, against each other, whether that was interreligiously, religiously, racially, socioeconomically, whatever, but we're turning against each other. And I think what yesterday did and what last week did was it made us forget all that
And brought it
and
together,
come together as one. And we went back to 1995. And that
the
feeling
excitement
of,
was high.
Yeah, the excitement was high. That feeling of anything is possible and we can conquer, and the future blooms bright for us as a nation.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what he's hinting to, that that atmosphere is back
With that.
but we've got to retain that sense.
And look, I know with time won't permit us to get into it, but I just think, okay, like, you got the Employment Equity Act or things like that where people are chosen. I mean, race is taken into account sometimes over merit. And we can't comment too much on that. But it has, I think, an implication on people's morale. So I think let's leave it at that, if that's okay. And then, but I think it needs to be taken into cognizance that you're supposed to be working at your peak, but sometimes you're only going to reach a certain spot, and then nothing's going to happen. So
I think what I'm taking from what he's saying and what yesterday represented was that we're not black, white, Indian, whatever. We are South African.
Yeah.
That's what we stood as yesterday, as South Africans.
Yeah.
And maybe going forward,
if
one
only
hopes
that
we
could
all
be the
stand
only
together
yeah.
as South Africans.
I hear that, and I think that would be amazing if that could happen. But you were talking about the symptoms of burnout before the ad break.
Right.
And while I was listening to it, the clinician in me was saying, "Oh, that sounds like a symptom of anxiety, or that sounds like a symptom of depression, or whatever, chronic fatigue syndrome, whatever it is." But there was a lot of overlapping of, the so-called anxiety or worry. And many people will say, oh, you look, or even stress. How do we differentiate burnout from normal stress or anxiety?
Okay, so let me give you the distinctive characteristics, right? So stress is characterized by over-engagement. So you start doing more and more to try and to keep up, the more stressed you feel. Okay. Whereas burnout is characterized by disengagement. You start pulling away. So suddenly I don't want to do it. I'm going to procrastinate. I'm going to leave it.
It doesn't
to the
mean
last
so
minute.
much to me. So let me move. Okay.
Yes. Stress is where you are overreactive. So you're more easily irritable, or you're more excitable, or your cortisol levels are so high, so you're like constantly like on the go.
So you're ready for any
you're
action.
Ready for anything. It's almost like that fight or flight.
Right.
So you're on that fight response.
Right.
You're ready to take on anything. Whereas with burnout, your emotions become blunted. So it's almost a dulling, a numbing of feeling. Stress would produce urgency and hyperactivity. Burnout is hopelessness and helplessness.
Okay.
So then
I can't do too much to change this. I'm not even equipped with the right kind. So those kind of excuses, those kind of feelings.
So whereas with stress, you'd be like, okay, I need to do this. These are my deadlines, and I've got to do everything by a certain time. With burnout, you're like, it's no point. What is the point? Even if I do it, what's it going to change?
Okay.
Stress can be loss of energy, but burnout is loss of motivations, ideals, and hope, which is more dangerous actually.
Then, yeah.
Stress would lead to anxiety disorders. Burnout will lead to detachment and depression. So I think stress, we can maybe say, would lead more to anxiety issues, but burnout more to more serious conditions like depression.
Okay, so anxiety is fear-driven, right?
Yeah.
So with burnout, it sounds like the opposite of it. That I'm not even afraid. I'm not even attached to any of this. This means nothing to me.
Yes, I'm thinking of an example I read of a millennial who gave an account of a millennial burnout, and he said he was so caught up in doing everything and getting things done, and also with them, because our emails on our phone now, there's no cutoff time, is there? Whereas before we worked 9 to 5. Now you're getting an email from work at 8 o'clock, you have to respond, right? Especially if it's from across the world and the time zones are different.
So you're on all the time.
You're on all the time. So there's constant anxiety there. And eventually he just decided to just drop everything and leave everything. And even when he's just stopped going to work, because there's that detachment and sense of helplessness and no motivation. Even when he got fired, he was like, I don't care. And let's just see what happens from here. And I see that even with people now starting to say, I'm going to do like a detox where I'm going to go so many days without my phone, or an hour or two without my phone.
There's actually apps now that encourage you to stay away from your phone, or they do a switch
irony
off
that
for
you need an app to encourage you to stay away from your phone.
I know, right?
But even like when you're going out to dinner with friends, I don't know if you notice, people sometimes have baskets and they put all the cell phones in there. And they say the first person to reach for the cell phone, you have to pay for it. So we have that. Then with stress, the primary damage is physical, right? So you get the emotional, the physical illnesses, maybe getting flu more often, stuff like that. Whereas with burnout, it's primarily emotional. So there's an emotional blunting, emotional numbing. And you can see how that's a build-up to depression.
Yeah, because it sounds like that not getting isolation or not getting joy in what used to give you joy before sounds
Life
to me a
has
lot
no
like
meaning
depression.
Suddenly.
Yeah.
And stress may kill you prematurely, especially if you look at the personality types related with stress. But burnout makes you feel like life doesn't seem worth living. I think, though, the difference between burnout and depression, burnout can lead to depression, but it's different from depression.
Okay.
Because depression can be triggered by other kinds of experiences or incidents in your life, can be more chronic, whereas burnout can be managed within a short to mid-term range, I suggest. But depression can be a bit more longer than that. But we can see that burnout can lay the foundation
for depression.
Right. But depression is also where it's more intense, where you're having suicidal thoughts, where you completely withdraw from everybody.
Okay.
Personally, even your spiritual value, everything. You don't want to take part in any aspect of your life. And the change in appetite and energy and sleep patterns. So I think depression is a bit more on the extreme end of that scale.
And probably a bit more pervasive as well, like using every aspect of life.
Yeah, but burnout, I think, can lay which is why it's so important that it be acknowledged medically, because it can lead the pathway for depression.
Right. So I hear that if it's not treated, if it's not acknowledged, if it's just, pushed under the rug, it can lead to more serious stuff.
Yes.
That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
So what happens if you suspect someone is suffering from burnout? What are the options here in terms of where do you send them? What are the treatment plans? Or because it's not that clear cut, since we know it's not deemed so-called medical, right?
Right. I think that working with a psychologist would assist, because they're understanding concepts like burnout, and they're able to differentiate between stress, burnout, and depression, and they're able to place you correctly.
Right.
And then they would also teach you how to find a balance, how to prioritize, how to overcome that which is like leaving you feeling helpless and hopeless.
Yeah.
And
so I guess normalizing it, finding meaning. And I've heard somewhere they say the opposite of burnout is self-care. And I know ironically you were saying no one even has time for self-care. Self-care, boundaries, prioritizing life, things like that.
Yeah.
And we're going to go for a short ad break. But after this, we're going to talk about personality types that are more prone to burnout. So we'll catch you soon. Welcome back to Mindful Matters, where we're talking about burnout with Dr. Shaista Hamid. So Shaista, we were talking about, it is quite difficult to differentiate burnout from anxiety, stress and depression. There are certain overlaps in how burnout can lead to these conditions as well. And it's important to acknowledge them and treat them before they become a bit more serious. And I wanted to discuss this with you are there certain people or personality types that are more prone to burnout? Because I remember back in my day, I say that very glibly, there used to be the personality types A and B. And personality type A was known to be very driven and B was a bit more relaxed. And they'd say A would have, heart attacks and B is prone to certain things. That was the narrative of the time. I'm not sure if there's how it's broken up now. There's many different ways of, dividing up or differentiating with personalities. Do you think certain personality types are more prone to burnout?
I think we're still looking, there are newer categorizations of the personality types associated with burnout.
Yeah,
but
and we're not talking about the pathologies now. We're not talking about narcissists and all that. We're talking about personality types.
But I think, everybody always falls back on type A and type B because those were the most common way of understanding.
Yeah.
Also, when you find medically, they were categorized by medical, by cardiologists, right?
Yeah,
So
because
they
type
came
A
up
was
with
known for cardiovascular disease, I'm not sure if it was stroke as well, but because of high blood pressure, they were usually very driven people.
So your type A's are your perfectionists. They very highly structured. They working within very demanding what can I say, work levels, or
I think they would make it demanding wherever they are. So
they're impatient. They tend to be highly organized, very competitive, and can sometimes even be a little bit aggressive.
Because I think they're not people orientated, they're more task orientated.
Yes.
It's about getting the job done,
Getting
not
to the
making
goal.
Get to the goal.
As fast as we can.
Right.
And then type B is seen as less neurotic, not
Laid
frantic,
back.
explainable, more laid back.
Right.
And I even read articles where they said your type B isn't as ambitious or isn't likely to be as competitive or driven. Though I disagree with this. I think you can be a type B personality, in the sense that you wouldn't make your work your world, but you can be an achiever still. Yes, there's a strong association between your type A and cardiovascular and other medical conditions. And I think they have a difficulty in finding boundaries. Like my husband, I know, is a type A. And when I watch him, I see the difference between the way both of us approach our work and life. So he's highly organized, highly structured. Time management is of, essence to him. And everything must be done perfectly. So he can wake up at 3 a.m. just to ensure that his work is done to the standard that he needs it to be. Okay. And he'd wake up at 3 a.m. because there's not enough time in the day to give him that time to get it. And I'd be sometimes like, I don't understand. You could just let it slide. You could give the same information, but it doesn't have to be in that particular, on that fancy paper or wrapped up in that particular color ribbon or whatever. But it's the detail.
So they're very detail oriented.
Very detail oriented. Perfectionist. Nothing must be wrong in it.
Right.
And that puts a lot of pressure. And then also finding that time. Now imagine if you're depriving yourself of sleep in order to meet those.
To make sure it's up to standard.
Yeah,
up to your standard.
Up to your standard, not even the other standard. Because the other might have expected lesser and they would have been happy still. But your standards are so high that you make it unmanageable for yourself.
To attain it. Yeah.
So in a way you become your own worst enemy.
Yeah. He's a matric tutor, by the way. So, it's good to have a perfectionist matric tutor.
Yes, he tutors in physics, so it's very...
good for the students.
For the students, I think it's a big bonus for them. It's a huge advantage for them because it's always pushing the bench, so to speak. But personally, then the toll must take on oneself, right? But I think the more modern way of looking at the types of personalities associated with burnout is, one is the workaholic, which I think speaks for itself. So they are performance oriented and often struggle with work-life integration, finding a balance again. Okay. If you're a workaholic, you're likely to get worn out and neglect self-care in your personal life. Sometimes the cycle of overworking isn't as easy to break, especially if you come from what we as psychologists would refer to as performance-oriented value system. So we look at people who look at that performance or that goal as the direction or the main dictate of your life. So achieving that job, achieving that task, that's how you see your
that's
identity.
how you get your sense of worth as well, I would guess.
Your sense of worth, your identity is so intermingled with that. So you'd spend too much of time on that and may neglect
other aspects
personal life, or you can't draw a balance between the two. Then you get the people pleaser. Where if you had opportunity to express a lack of challenging work, a lack of support, overload or neglect, and haven't because you wanted to keep your manager or your other colleagues happy, then
That's more a people-orientated person, but they still put pressure on themselves, I would assume.
Or you take on work from others simply because you don't want to say no, because you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, or you want to make everyone happy.
Okay.
But you're taking on too much without drawing boundaries, once again, for yourself. And then the perfectionist, which is they strive for flawlessness and setting high performance standards. They have very high critical self-evaluations and concerns about the thoughts of others. So they set incredibly high standards for themselves and are usually workaholics, and they feel that they get happiness or reassurance when they feel they've met the other person's standard, for or positive feedback from that other person, then they feel I've done a good enough job.
The validation is external as well. And I keep on thinking, God forbid if you all three, because all those boxes could easily be ticked, you know.
And the other thing is, I think people don't understand, is the problem with seeking validation from external is that your mood and your sense of being and wellness is always going to be influenced by the other. Whether people are happy with you or sad with you. And sometimes you can go the mile and more, and people might still be unhappy with that product. Yeah. So you need to...
And plus they influenced by whatever they're going through. So if they're having a bad day, you think you're owning it and trying to make it better, but you can't, because that's just something they're going through.
Exactly. I think also when we as psychologists starting out, you think you're going to save everybody in the world and that's your task. And that's quite a load and responsibility to put on yourself.
Yeah. And I think doctors also have the same thing, because it's all about saving people. And then you come to a point where you go, I don't know how much of saving we can actually do, and responsibility comes on the patient or the person in front of us.
Or sometimes you might see that person cannot be saved, but you'll still do extra
as much as you can,
just to please the family. Maybe that's the people pleaser part coming out, to please the family or the relatives, and try, even though it's not gonna necessarily work for that patient.
And I think drawing those lines are where we can save ourselves from burnout.
Yes.
And some, as much as burnout is about detachment, I think some detachment from work is very important for our own sanity.
Yes.
Yeah. So, as always, time always goes so quickly. And we've discussed so much in the short time that we've had. I don't know if there's anything else you think that we've missed out or that you want to give as parting advice for our listeners.
I just think that the last words I want to say is that always... I'm not saying this from the perspective of being a selfish person, but always prioritize yourself. Make you number one, because that organization, that company, whatever it is, will still go on regardless of whether you're there or not, whether you put 110% or not. You need to value and give importance to family time, and you need to prioritize that, because at the end of it all, that's what brings true meaning to your life. And if you don't have that, then that's really, I feel, incredibly sad. And maybe you need to again reevaluate your life and where it's going, if work is all that there is that's driving you.
It's all about the balance.
It's about the balance, and it's about putting yourself first and knowing what's important for you, what gives you satisfaction aside from work, and pursuing that, whether it's climbing Mount Kilimanjaro or going to an island for a getaway or whatever. But do what makes you happy. Don't get lost
in the
all
work.
The noise.
There's more that you as the person can get so easily lost.
Exactly.
And Jazakallah so much for joining us. We hope to catch you again next month,
inshallah.
So as a parting, I would like to share how I see burnout, and that is giving off too much of ourselves and from a space that we don't possess. So take care of yourself. It's not selfish. We cannot pour from an empty vessel. Thus, it is our duty to ensure our emotional cup is filled first. Next week, we're going to meet Dr. Zubair Mullah and talk about mental disorder in men. So please stay tuned for that, inshallah. Salams. And remember, be kind, be mindful, and take care of yourself. See you next week.